All right, everybody, we got another very special guest for y'all this week. I want everyone to welcome to the show Keith Foster. Welcome to the show, Keith.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm ready to talk some comics with you.
I can tell everyone I'm always very appreciative that anybody wants to come and talk to me about comics. So thank you for being on. So Keith, right now, everyone out there, we'll put it up top. You're out promoting Animals #1 on Kickstarter, your new comic through Invader Comics.
Yeah,
So we will talk a little bit about that, but we got to put you through the ringer.
of
So
course.
let's start with the origin story. What got you into comics? And then at what point were you like, hey, I think I can create these things?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate all that. So I'm going to jump around in time. In
Okay.
the '80s, that's what got me into comics. I'm a bit up in years, I guess, and so for me, I remember getting into comics in, like, I don't know, seventh, eighth grade, and it was some friends that got me into comics. And I remember going to the comic store for the first time, and the book that got me to love comics was Secret Wars #4. So Secret Wars #4, for those that may not know, has an amazing cover. It actually has the Hulk holding up a mountain, and in the gap, if the Hulk was not holding up the mountain, then it would crush the Hulk and all of the Marvel heroes at the time, basically. And so the Hulk is like holding up, however many damn pounds a mountain is, and of course all the other superheroes are kind of like knocked silly, as the Hulk is protecting them. So when I saw that, and it's a cool cover because the majority of the cover is like the mountain itself, and then the Hulk and the heroes cut like this tiny bit of space. It's basically like a ton of negative space, right? So yeah, I saw that, and I think another comic that was on the racks at the time. I can't remember which one exactly, but it was early on in Black Costume Spider-Man. So let's go with like 255, something like that. So I remember loving that, and then of course there's mail order to track down some other issues, and I think I mail ordered for a Amazing 252 for like $3 or something. It was like, I don't know, man, this is a lot of money. $3 for Amazing Spider-Man 252. But anyway, so that's when my love was made. And so I did that I kind of did the requisite turn in comics. I was in it for 14, 16 months, and then I got to high school. And then, back then, liking comics was not a way to be popular in high school. Neither was listening to Metallica and heavy metal. I did all of those things. I'm happy to say that the world sort of caught up with me, but back then, not so much, not so much. So comics went away, and then I got back into comics in college and really started reading them. I actually worked at a comic book shop, and then after that, the journey kind of, so I think that's the origin on how I loved them. And back in the day, so when I was in college, that dates around the big Marvel exodus for Image, the death of Superman, things like that. And then after that, actually, I got out of college and I worked in the comic industry again. I worked for a distributor that was a competitor of Diamond, and they went out of business a couple years in. So then I just got a real job in corporate America and all that stuff, and kept on reading comics and liking comics. But I didn't really think about making them for another, I don't know, 10 or plus 10 so years. And that's because one of my main passions at the time, I mean, still is, I just don't do a lot with it, is making music. And so I've been in a band for the better part of 25 years, something like that. And so the band's name is Big Pimp Jones. We make currently a little bit funk music, and we have some music right now on Spotify if people want to check it out. It's just instrumental groove funk, and that's kind of what we made our name on, decade, 2 decade, between 10, 20 years ago, something like that. But so what happened was we had done a couple fake exploitation soundtracks. Basically, here's this soundtrack to a movie that never got made, and it's super rare, and we're bringing it to you. The whole thing was a hoax, but it was presented. All the music was by us, but it was presented as this fake soundtrack. And so we had some nice success with the first two soundtracks we did for that. And then we went to the label and we said, we want to do a fake Lost Godzilla soundtrack. We want to fit in this vibe. And so we had made this really cool, like funky Godzilla music because I was a Godzilla fan. And they came back and they said, no, this isn't right for us. So we're sitting there with this soundtrack, and I had taken screenwriting classes in college. I had taken some fiction classes in college, English. I was almost an English major, but then moved away from it. And so I was like, well, why don't I write a comic around this soundtrack? And that ended up being, without getting too detailed into it, that ended up being the birth of Kadoja, which is the comic I've been doing for a little more than 10 years, I think now. So Kadoja, that became the first issue of Kadoja. I found an artist named Rory Smith. I ended up working with a guy named Lance Pilgrim, who I had done some stuff musically through. He's a graphic designer, and Kadoja was born. So we self-released issues 1 through 5, which was the first volume, and worked Comic Cons and hustled and did all that stuff. And then when we were ready for the second volume, we ended up tabling across from 215 Inc. And 215 Inc. during the convention, I wasn't even there. I was actually in New York. It was New York Comic Con. And at the time, Rory and Lance worked some of the East Coast conventions on their own. And then I worked the West Coast conventions because I was living out here. I had moved out to the West Coast in 2009, which is pretty much the entirety of like my comic career. And so, yeah, we got approached by 215. 215 ended up grabbing a trade of that we had done of volume 1. And then they let us know they wanted to publish a book. So we were like, yeah, that sounds great. So we went to 215 Inc. And again, I'm gonna accelerate through this. We relaunched it. So we ended up sort of taking a creative step back for about a year and a half so that we could relaunch and rework a little bit the first 5 issues of Kadoja. And then to kind of continue that thread, we are now on our 4th volume of Kadoja. So we've done 15 issues. The 16th is going to come out shortly. It's probably going to be an 18-issue mega arc spanning 4 volumes. But somewhere along the way, I got approached by the owner at the time of 215, and he said he was thinking of, kind of moving on from comics. And he could put me in contact with some people and whatever. I was like, well, what about your spot in 215? So I ended up joining the company 215 Inc. And one thing led to another. People left, and then another person's kind of come on since then. And then we rebranded ourselves as Invader. So Invader has been a thing since the beginning of 2022, maybe a little bit earlier than that. And we, rose from the ashes of 215 Inc. And we're actually re-releasing some of our favorite books on 215 Inc. as Invader books with some updates as we can. But yeah, that's, I think that sort of covers in a nutshell my birth into comics, me writing comics, and of course, me being part of a comic company now. And then along the way, I released a second title last year called 3 Protectors. So the first one is essentially a mean Godzilla book. It's, giant monsters meet H.P. Lovecraft. And then the second book was 3 Protectors, which is Kung Fu in Space, or is Kung Fu in Space, Shaw Brothers, but science fiction. And now we're launching my 3rd book, which I'm happy about. It's just pure horror, and it's called Animals.
Yeah, the 3 Protectors book, my regular co-host on the show was a big fan of it.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
You get he's one, like, so with me, like, you put Star Wars in the title, I'm there.
Yeah.
You do Kung Fu, he's there. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. It's funny, I actually have a connection with 215 too, and I remember when the rebranding happened, and I was a little taken aback because I wasn't in the loop with those guys anymore. But back even before we did this podcast, I knew the Perkins brothers who did Beware, I think the book was called.
Yeah.
And Stephen Lindsay, who did Jesus Hates Zombies.
Yes.
For 215. So some of the early at least from my knowledge, some of the early 215 stuff that was coming out, I was kind of there and knew the guys involved back then. So
that's awesome.
It was cool to see them rebrand and do something new. And of course, it's, as my listeners know, like, big Philly fan, sports fan, and everything. It seems like my life is always attracted to Phillies brands in some way, and not even knowing that 215 was a Philly brand, and then becoming a fan of theirs.
Well, that was kind of the irony for me, because I'm also from Philly. Even though where I moved in 2009, it was from Philadelphia out to the let's call it the LA area. The Inland Empire specifically is where I live now, the suburban area kind of outside of LA. But yeah, so for me, it was like, I'm coming back to it. I'm going to join a company named 215 Inc. And I claim Philly, but then, 215 happens, and I'm on 215 Inc. Yet I live in California. Mike Perkins, the editor in chief of 215 now Invader, lives in Oakland. So it's like, yeah, the 215 identity doesn't ring as strong. Like like I love Philly. I'm from there. I'm a fan of
Mhm.
all their sports teams still. But yeah, so that was hence the Invader rename, and we thought it was time for some fresh stuff and kind of a fresh identity, and that's why we did our thing.
Yeah, I thought the Invader rename was I like the name better. Not to trash on 215 because obviously I love them.
Yeah.
But I thought the name was better and the logo was so cool. Like you guys did a great job of designing that.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, I know Mike tells the story that 215 Inc. people mistook us for like a tattoo company, if I remember right. So I think we wanted to do something that was a little, just more straightforward and clean. Invader
Yeah.
Comics. It's nice. It's, like you said, it's a little bit cleaner. Um, and yeah, we love our logo. So thank you.
Did someone buy the name 215? Because I remember somebody sent me like a few months ago, an old friend who's also connected to 215 actually. And I think the website's like a pen store now.
Yeah, I actually believe that one of the original, I mean, I think one of the original people from 215 Inc., the company, took
Mhm.
215 back and now they do pens. So it does fit the ink thing pretty well.
Yeah, that was really funny when I saw that. I go, that's okay. That's
Yeah,
different.
on brand. Yeah, on brand.
So you guys have done a few Kickstarters, and I guess a great place to start is when you guys did the rebrand. I remember 215, you were really, I mean, not you, but the company was really trying to do direct to diamond, get stuff out. I mean, the guys were hustling left and right, going to cons and free comic book days and all that kind of stuff. And now it seems with Invader, you also had kind of a brand re-identity where you're hitting Kickstarter first and then going to direct market. So could you talk a little bit about the thinking there of why going that direction?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's meant to be it's meant to be a dual pronged thing, right? Where we still are happy to go through Diamond. We still love our comics retailers. Comics retailers are such a foundation of the industry. That the point isn't to kind of push them aside. It's to have kind of a dual thing, right? So we have the comics retailers through Diamond. The downside of working through Diamond is you don't have a good bead on who your fans are, and so launching the Kickstarters gives us a couple things that we can do. First, we get to interact directly with the fans, which is amazing. Second, by interacting directly with the fans, we can give extra cool stuff away, right? Like we can give free books, free ash cans, free digitals, and just keep on pouring cool stuff on. I believe Mike had a story where we wanted to give away a free book one time through Diamond, and it was a logistical headache, if not nightmare, to do. So going direct allows us to do that as well. And then the other thing is it allows us to reward the creators because the comics process, like a lot of, let's just go with like things that pay artists, the money for the artists can be quite backloaded and well after all these things have happened. So this allows to have that a little bit more upfront as well. So we like to think that it's more creator friendly, and it's definitely more fan friendly, and it can also give us kind of two things to go forward, and then people can do what they want, and they can make their choice. And what we like is that they're separate. So any we do this with all our Kickstarters, but Animals is a great example. The main thing that you get with the Animals Kickstarter is a cover that you can't get through Diamond. There's the Diamond cover, and there's the Kickstarter cover. We do have some tiers, in our Kickstarters sometimes where if people want the Diamond cover, they can get both. But in general, the point is to offer an exclusive thing direct to fans and to interact and have a nice conversation directly with the fans and give some cool stuff too.
Yeah, I think that's important that a lot of the bigger publishers who jump on Kickstarter miss is the exclusivity of something, like whether it's something as simple as just a cover, like to
Mhm.
give those backers something special that they can be like, I was there for the Kickstarter, and feel kind of superior to the guy who got it at the comic shop. That's really important to Kickstarter, and to justify your space on Kickstarter too, because I know, and I say this because I used to be one of these people, so I like to like reiterate it over and over again. There's still a lot of people who don't believe that publishers should be on Kickstarter,
Mhm.
and even ones as small as you guys. So to create that atmosphere and play the Kickstarter game, so to say, I feel is really important for a lot of you guys.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, hey, it's all good. Whatever choices people make, right? So
Mhm.
the diamond books are there for people, and the Kickstarter books are there for people, and yeah, we like our sort of dual prong model there.
Yeah, and I also reiterate that point. I used to be one of those people, and I'm not anymore after talking to a lot of publishers and seeing why the not only the financial
Hmm.
point of view of it, but also the getting to know your customers. Like, uh, smaller publishers don't have Spider-Man. So like Marvel can put out Spider-Man whatever and people will buy it. But like you guys, you're putting out Animals #1 right now. Nobody's heard of this book. Um, it's it's not gonna it's not gonna set the world aflame immediately because it's a new thing and you gotta attract people in some way. And I think Kickstarter also helps with that model as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate it. No, I mean, it's
So,
all about spreading the word and finding as many avenues as we can.
yeah.
We're exploring the digital world just like a lot of people are. What we've found, and I don't know if this is something that you've found too, Chris, is a lot of times the diamond space, the Kickstarter space, and the digital space, they're three different places. There's not
Mhm.
a lot of overlap there. Like, I mean, I back projects on Kickstarter. I also have a pull list that's a little too damn big at my local comic shop. So, and Kevin in Invader, he tends to favor digitals.
Mhm.
And it's not like digital fans aren't sitting there going, "Do I buy the digital or do I buy the physical?" And vice versa. It's different groups, and I think as a publisher, you want to make sure that you're finding as many of those groups as you can, and giving them the thing that they think is cool.
Yeah. And there's prongs inside the digital because like I know Mike, my co-host, and a few other people buy only stuff digitally, whether it's, I mean, once upon a time it was always Comixology. Now
Hmm.
it's more varied because of what's gone on there. But I've met people who only read webtoons comics.
Yeah,
I mean, not for me, but like they're getting the same enjoyment I am out of these books that you can only get through webtoons. So
yeah, totally. My
it's a
kid is one
crazy
of those
space.
people. Yeah, yeah. Again, it's if that's what they like and what works for them, and they get enjoyment. Hey, go for it.
Yeah. So we've danced around it a little bit. Let's talk more in depth about animals. So I think
Sure.
the best way to start this is what's kind of the pitch? What is animals?
Yeah. Okay. So animals is so you have the a sheriff in Washington State in Olympic National Park that investigates a series. So the way the book is presented is it's a couple pieces in time, and so what we see is we see a series of attacks where it appears that animals have. In one case, it looks like an animal has come back from the dead to kill a hunter. In the second case, it looks like an animal has stalked people and killed one of them with human like intelligence and malice. And then as we get further along, I don't want to spoil the comic, but I think I can spoil the first half of it. That the sheriff and a game and what is it, game and wildlife, I think, or fish and game, person expert come in and they start unraveling this thing. And what they find is that we got some problems here. The animals do appear to be coming back from the dead and hunting humans. and this this could be quite a big problem. And then things escalate a little bit. Again, without giving away the ending of the first issue, it's going to be a 2-issue limited series. There is, it looks like there is a contagious virus that is infecting the animals and making them act like this.
Yeah, and when reading it, I think my favorite part of the book is when you're first reading it, it feels almost like an anthology where it's like, here's a story about an animal and like a crazy situation. And then you flip to another part and it's like, here's a story about an animal in a crazy situation. And then you flip to the third part, and without spoiling it as well, you find out there's much more going on and these things are connected in some way. And I like that because the first half, I'm like, oh, it's just a cool little anthology book. And then I see there's actually a broader story that's being told here. Was
Mhm.
that intentional, or am I getting that by accident?
I think you nailed it. I mean, it's a so I write animals. The art is by a very cool digital paint artist whose name is Ed Condon, who I think adds a lot to the book. Something I mentioned to someone, actually to Blake, I think on his show, was that there's a design, like the art and the words kind of work in concert, and the art is meant to be kind of weird and unsettling. That I couldn't have imagined working with a standard comic artist, a Marvel DC style comic artist. It would have needed to be very, it was, I love Bill Sienkiewicz, so I kind of wanted it to have that raw, strange paint splatter Bill Sienkiewicz feel. But yes, to your point about the anthology, that's the type of story that I was really looking to tell, at least to get it started. I love the idea of narratives that are interconnected short stories, where you sort of have a short story and then you read a second short story. And to your point, you then go like, wait a minute, I think there's a connection here. And then you get to the third short story and now there is, like, they are actually making a larger story told through separate short stories. It's something I plan to explore a little bit more, scattered even in the future. But yeah, man, I mean, you nailed it as far as I'm concerned, which is it starts with a couple separate vignettes. And then the third, piece of it is where you realize that they're linked, and then things escalate a bit from there.
Yeah, and that's what for me elevated it. Was that third story when when like, okay, these are connected. There's like a broader story here that's connecting all these little short stories together. I thought it was done really well.
Yeah, thank you.
And to your what you were saying about the artist, that's another thing that makes it very unique. Is it's almost like a it's almost like a watercolor weirder Jacques,
Hmm.
if you know that artist. Like, I love the art style because it kind of blurs a lot of things, and I like the way he contrasts the people in the story in almost a black and white fashion to the almost monstrous blurred out animals that are going kind of crazy. um I just love what the artist did. I wouldn't even have known it was digital either. I would have assumed he was doing it with some sort of watercolor, like pencils and then watercoloring over it or something like that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
how did you connect with the artist?
He was actually an artist who submitted to Invader. Or I think it was even 215 at the time. I think it dates back to then. We get submission. We have a submissions page through our site, and what we tell people is that the number one thing we're looking for is comics, completed comics, and the more completed, the better. But we are happy to look at writing submissions, at artist submissions. We like having submissions open. We like having an eye out, an ear out for talent, and for and to have that line where people can say, hey, I have something cool I want to share with you, and maybe we can do some work together. So yeah, he came in through the submission mail, and he had actually done some cool. It was like he had reworked, I think, a Hellboy story in his style, like 3 or 4 pages of it, and it was exactly what you see. It was this crazy kinetic paint with the sketched on black and white characters, and the whole thing was just so raw and expressive. And for me, that's the thing I like in the books I do. I want them. I want them to be raw and expressive. I want you to feel the art. That's my favorite. My favorite stuff is where you feel it. Again, Sienkiewicz, Frank Miller, Sin City. You feel a certain thing when you're reading that. Um, and there are plenty of other books that have that vibe as well. You don't have to be crazy to have that cool raw feel to it. But like Sam Keith is another one. Like with Kadoja Volume One, Rory I think did. Rory Smith kind of drew in like a raw Sam Keith kind of thing. So yeah, I like feeling art, and I like doing my best to be part of something where the people can feel it as they read it as well.
Well, and his style fits the story as well. Like the way the horror elements work, and like kind of the over the top nature of the animals. Like I mean, the bear in the story has like these jagged, almost crooked, weird teeth that come out, and like the way he draws his eyes and everything. It really accentuates the horror elements of it. And then when he does like um a mutilation or a kill moment, it's almost so stylistic that it's not jarring in the way like a realistic like Evil Dead movie would be,
Hmm.
but it's jarring in its own way because it's so stylized, and the color and the black and white coming together. It's I mean, it's unique is what it is. I can't think of another book that has that style to it, and especially in this genre.
I mean, I like to hear that. I like. I mean, I know, God, you've had so many awesome creators on here. So I'm happy to have a name on the list, in line with so many of these great people. But it's like that's the art I want to do. And I'm
Mhm.
sure like that's what people say over and over. I want to make the thing that responds with me. So no, I appreciate it when you say it's there's not nothing quite like it. I love that, because part of that is I want to make sure that the comics I'm making, that's my goal, right? I want to make comics that aren't like other things in at least one way, whether it's a twist or whether it's something that diverges a little more wildly.
Yeah, because when I say it, the art reminds me of Jacques a little bit. It's even like that's not a correct comparison at the same time. It's really hard for me to compare this artist to anyone I read. I mean, it's a little bit of Jacques, it's a little bit of Jeff. It's he's taking so many influences together like a great artist should, and making something really unique that I absolutely love, and especially for this particular kind of story.
No, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
I know he gave me that feel when I saw his pages, that like I'll go to an art museum or something like that. And I go through art museums in a different way that like my wife does. My wife goes through an art museum going from painting to painting and studying them, and just like, okay, let me think about this. Let me think about that. Let me think about that. And so she tends to take 2 to 3 times as long in an art museum as I do. Because what I do is I walk in a big room and I just survey the room, and I'm like, that one. And then I go and stare at that for like 5 minutes. I just look at the one I really like. I look at the one I
Mhm.
feel, and I try to get in that vibe of like, what do I feel about this? Why do I like this one so much? And the other paintings in the room, I mean, if there's 3 cool ones, I'm going to look at all 3. But if it's not something that moves me, it might as well not exist. So yeah, it was neat to get that vibe from a comic artist, because it's
Yeah.
not a feeling I get a lot in comics and sequential art. So yeah, it was really neat to make this book with him, and have the words turn into these cool like expressive things that make me feel something.
Yeah, it's one of those things in comics in general that's kind of a shame that, and I'm just as guilty as anybody, that we talk a lot about writers and like who's our favorite writer. And I follow Ed Brubaker from book to book, or someone else from book to book, and it's very rare for readers to really do that, have that same feeling for an artist.
Hmm.
And I think there's a few that I do that with, but it's very rare. And it's a shame because stuff like this where you get someone who does something incredible, and it's much tougher for them to really get the recognition in the industry as a whole for great unique art. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Look, this is an industry stacked with talent.
Yeah.
Like for me, it is, and I think for all of us, there are so many comics out there. There are just too many comics out there. You can't collect them all. You can't read them all, and you definitely can't be aware of all of them. For me,
Yeah.
like I generally make a point of reading previews cover to cover twice when I'm doing my, like previews coming out is a big thing to me. I think I'd argue that I like previews coming out more than I like books coming out. I like thinking about the books that I want 2 months from now. It seems like more than I like reading the ones that I read about 2 months ago in previews. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, it's like, I mean, that's just sort of, we like that. We like shopping in the window and having this thing that's like, oh my God, I might love this comic. But I say that because I read through it cover to cover. And then I tell the shop, like, yeah, let me get my holds, get my holds. And it feels like every week I am in the comic shop and I'm like, why did I not know about this book? This looks really cool. You can, or even every week I'm looking at like comic list on the Monday and I'm like, okay, that's coming out, that's coming out, that's coming out. It's just so different to get in the shop and then stare at the
Mhm.
covers. You're like, wow, that is really cool. I can't believe I missed that. Or I remember reading, one tiny thing about it and then that was it. So yeah, having too much cool stuff is a great problem to have. And hey, we're all just trying to carve out our own tiny little place. So you take a look at our stuff and hope that it fits in with all the other cool stuff out there.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment of I read previews cover to cover as well. It's one of my favorite parts of the month. It's almost
Hmm.
more, like you said, it's more fun than reading the comics sometimes. I go to Kickstarter like twice, sometimes 3 times a month, looking at the books. Some of that's for the show, trying to find creators to talk to, but some of
Hmm.
it, a lot of it is I'm a super backer on Kickstarter as well. And then I'm the one who gathers all the information for the show. So I'm reading the news constantly. And I still miss books that I go to the shop and I'm like, what is this? So I can't imagine what the quote unquote normie is doing when they walk in the shop and it's like, what happened here?
Yeah.
Because there's just so much out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And to
Yeah,
and to your point, right? Like if we even this, I mean, again, there's this to me, this illustrates how much cool stuff there is. I have people who, like you said, I may not buy everything they do, but I'm going to give it a good shot. Scott Snyder writes something, I'm at least going to look at it. Jeff
yeah,
Lemire writes something, I'm probably buying it. So like Jeff Lemire, James Tinian, Forthright, like those guys, I'm probably buying everything they do, but at minimum, I'm giving it a heavy, heavy consult. I still miss stuff. Like I love Daniel Warren Johnson. I love James Stokoe as artists. I had to be in a comic shop a couple weeks ago and I'm like, what the hell? That's a James Stokoe cover of a book. I know he didn't do the book, but there's his art on the cover right there. It's just too much. There's too much. There's too
right.
much to even keep track of your favorite people. So again, it's an embarrassment of riches, and we're all winners as long as we somehow keep up with it at some point in time.
That's that's a conversation I have with a friend of mine who actually owns the comic shop in our town regularly. He's like, "How are you not buying this book?" And I have to look at them and say, "Because I have to pay rent." Like that's the reason I'm not buying that book. Is if I buy every book that I think looks amazing, not to mention the stacks of books around this room that I have not read that I purchased. But
Off
if I
screen
did
right from
that, yeah, um, there's not enough money in the world for me to buy every book that I think looks awesome. So yeah, I agree with that. So let's talk a little bit. We've talked about how great the book is, how much I enjoyed the book and the art in the book and everything. Let's talk about the Kickstarter itself. So you guys went. One of the things I like about your campaign is it's fairly simple. Not a whole lot of frill. I mean, you've got the Kickstarter cover, the different cover sets you can buy, and all of that. I
hmm
think the big ticket item is already sold. The original art for the exclusive cover.
hmm
Um, you do have a really cool canvas, which is something kind of unique. So, was that just you saw his art and you're like, I need a canvas of this, or how did that come about?
that is exactly it. Yeah, what we did for that tier is there's actually a number of three. So what we're, depending on how many people back it, we're gonna make them a canvas. And if three people end up doing it, then we are going to make three separate canvases. So everyone gets a unique piece. And the main reason I did it was because it's the art is digital. So there's no physical bits of it. I love original art. I mean, I have a few pieces of it somewhere. I love when I have an artist that like I work with and I have the opportunity to purchase the original, even if that's a pencil, right? Even if they just do the pencils original, pencils, inks, whatever. I love having that original stuff. And Animals does not give me that opportunity or anyone because there's no physical originals. They're simply digital. So for me, it's this opportunity to be like, okay, well, these may not be originals, but we can make them one-offs. We can make them a special piece, and I wanted to do them as canvases in the spirit of, like kind of the ode to fine art that I think the painting is. To make them as canvases, I think would be pretty cool and pretty fitting for stuff that's digital painting. So yeah, I mean, you nailed it, and that was the spirit behind it, right? Like have some actual physical things out there in the world and come as close as we can to something that's original by making something unique.
Yeah, and everyone out there, quick info drop on the campaign. Like, it's all the usual stuff you expect. You can get a physical, you can get a digital, you can get, like I said earlier, the cover bundle and all that. And then you can get all of Keith's work. So you've got the Kadojo and the three protectors and all that in a big bundle.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got everything there that you'd expect in a Kickstarter campaign. And then one that I've been seeing more and more, it's an interesting idea. And I'm wondering, you've got one backer on it. The
Mm-hmm.
one-on-one Zoom session, what does that involve?
Yeah. So that is essentially an individual workshop. Not mentioned on this podcast, but part of my life for the past 5 years is that I have written a novel. I first started it a long time ago. I took classes at the out here. UCLA has this amazing creative extension with all these killer courses. I mean, there are killer courses all around the country, right? A lot of community colleges offer them that allow people to create. But yeah, I took a ton of novel classes, and in the process, was able to write my novel. And 5 years of workshopping at the heels of a mentor who's been published multiple times, and with smart classmates that are giving you great notes, like you get much better at giving notes. So this gives people the opportunity to have a one-on-one editorial session where, like, you have a comic, you have something, I'll read it and I'll give it notes, and then we will review the notes and go from there. And depending on, I'm flexible, and we'll see what people have to say. But yeah, it's just, and the other thing too is that I do a craft podcast with my buddy Scott Lost. It's called Making Comics, and every month we talk about making comics, or every week we talk about making comics. Sorry, it drops every Monday, and it's process. And so the people that listen to it make comics, and you combine. So we have this craft podcast that we do, and we're on like episode 130 or so, and then you have the 5 years of workshopping and all the knowledge before. Like, why not give people the opportunity to capitalize on that knowledge and get specific feedback for their comic, their book, their short story, whatever they choose.
Awesome. So looks like the campaign as of recording, so everybody, we're a few days behind what you're at. Hopefully it's much higher by then. But you're sitting at $1,200 about, and you've
Mm-hmm.
hit your first stretch goal, which
Yes.
means that everybody's going to get a free Animals print.
Yes. Yep, we're gonna pick a cool piece of art, virgin, right, without text or anything, and we're gonna print it up on a nice comic sized like cardstock, and then we'll drop that in all the physicals, and then of course for our digital people around the world, we'll do the phone wallpaper equivalent.
And then you've got a few other ones here. It looks like the next one is probably going to happen. So you have a backup story for
Mm-hmm.
Animals coming, and then a digital comics bundle and a cover upgrade. So first, the digital comics upgrade, is that like a bunch of your friends that also have books out, and you're sending out a bunch of free digital comics with the campaign?
That's going to be an Invader bundle, actually, and it's going to be a
Okay.
horror bundle. So when we hit that, we will give, or if we hit that, if we hit that, when we hit that, we will, we'll pick a couple cool books, and people just get some free digitals of a lot of Invader horror. We'll definitely stay in the horror genre,
Mhm.
since if you're back in a horror Kickstarter, you odds are you like it. And so yeah, we'll give that to them.
Yeah, one would think you like horror.
Yeah, exactly.
And then what's the cover upgrade? What does that entail for the book itself?
Yeah, we would do. I mean, we depending on what happens, we'll play around. But at its simplest, it'll be. I think what is it? DC Black Label does this kind of stuff, or maybe DC Black Label doesn't do it, but some of them are. I'm thinking of like Nice House on the Lake, which is a. I mean, I love that book,
Hmm.
and you could get the regular cover, but you could get a premium cardstock cover
Yes.
for a little bit more. And so this would be every physical Kickstarter backer gets a premium cardstock cover. We're going to put a nicer cover on there, and maybe even give it a little bit of a cover treatment, depending. We'll see what works. If it looks good on the book, we'll do it. If it doesn't, we'll just go with the cardstock. But it'll make it feel more premium when it's in your hand.
Awesome. And I know I missed a few things. You're doing metal cover. You're doing a whole bunch of stuff, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Well, that's I mean
you guys
that
are
and
going
that's
nuts
the
on
premise,
this.
right? We want to be able to just have this cool stuff.
Yeah.
Something that I like a lot, and that we do for some of our Kickstarters, are these like metal book plates, right? It's just a metal bookmark, and it's amazing how certain images. I mean, all images look pretty cool, but if you get like the right colors, the right color combination, those things pop, and they're so much fun. And I think I know. I'm guessing you are this way, and I know I am this way. I if I turn around, I'm pretty sure I'm about some portion through about 5 graphic novels. So I need to mark my place. And five
One,
might be an
two,
understatement.
3, 4, 5. Yes, I'm going
There
through
you go.
5 right now.
Yeah, yeah. So you need to mark your place. Bookmarks are great, and these are high quality metal bookmarks. They're not really going to get worn down the way normal cardboard or whatever is going to get worn down. And I think they're great. So and so do a lot of people. So we include that. Again, we have the prints. Something else I should mention is that all the tiers are going to come with music. Something I've done because I've been in a band forever is that every comic we do comes with the soundtrack. So anybody who backs the animal stuff, you're going to get a soundtrack too. In this case, it's kind of a mix of like, I don't know, like kind of electronic and hip hop with some elements of funk in it. If people want to hear what it's like, you can get a taste in the Kickstarter video. I play it under a couple parts where I talk. It's the intro music, etc. But yeah, it's rooted, I think, in hip hop, and then throw some electronic and some funk and some weird glitchy stuff on top as well. That's the sound that we're going for with animals that we feel sort of evokes the vibe.
I was actually trying to remind myself to ask you about the music. So is that your band or just you writing that?
That one's just me. Kadoja, the Kadoja ones have been my band, Big Pip Jones. But I mean, it's kind of like it all blends together now. Like we're sort of on permanent hiatus, but we still like making tracks. So odds are it's going to have some of the members of Big Pip Jones on it, just contributing some music here and there. The bassist, whoever it's going to be, and just making cool tracks. So it's like a rose by any other name. It's pretty much us.
And I wanted to say you kind of breezed past it, but metal bookmarks, that is awesome. I personally I see a lot of people complain about bookmarks online with Kickstarters. Keep sending me bookmarks, people. Like I can never have too many bookmarks.
Mhm.
Never have too many, but for them to be like metal and not that like I don't want to say cheap because I don't want to like put anyone down, but that like flimsy kind of paper stock ones that go bad after a few reads. That's awesome. That's high quality. That's putting a little bit extra into it. I love that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Again, I love that stuff, and you get the right look, the right color thing, and it flashes. It's super cool.
Yeah. And you're gonna get that awesome art on it too, everybody. I mean, look
Yeah,
at it.
yeah.
Now, Keith, you've been very generous with your time. So before we take off, anything else you want to pimp out? Do you have like social media you want everyone to go to, or where can I send people?
Yeah, so you can the social media, the pretty much the only social media I do is Keith_Invader, and that's Instagram. So yeah, I Instagram is my social media of choice. I mean, I have handles on a couple others, but I barely check them. So yeah, Keith underscore Invader on Instagram. You know, the Kickstarter's going on now, so that's the crux of it. But once the Kickstarter's through, I'll be posting art and books I like reading and all that stuff. And of course, which leads us into also the podcast I do. I talk about that, which is Making Comics. So Making Comics is available on everyone's favorite podcatchers. It is totally a craft podcast, you know. So yeah, if people out there like to make comics, or want to find out about the comics process, hey, there's everybody. There's a, to quote Parliament Funkadelic, everybody's got a little room under the sun. So, you know, always more podcasts, right? Like there can't be enough good podcasts. So yeah, those are the three, and then, or the two, and then there's my website, which is my name, KeithRFoster.com.
Awesome. So everybody, as usual, I will have those links in the show notes down below. So make sure you go check them out. And I don't know if I think I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. Red Animals. I think it's a great book. You all should check it out. And that's saying a lot because, as you all know, not a horror guy. So for me to be digging it is saying a lot. So Keith, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to come chat with me, talk about the book, and yeah, best of luck with the campaign. And this animal right here is not going to try to kill me, but he does want to go to bed.
Yeah, I feel safe with my own dog too. But yeah, man, no, thanks so much for having me, man. I enjoyed it, and I appreciate you taking the time.